Hello DevOps friends, hello everyone, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm doing another live stream, can you imagine? And even though there is splendid weather out there, I was just downstairs making tea and realized, oh my god, the sun is shining and it's really summer in Ireland. We are approaching 20 degrees, which is summer temperatures. And let's see how long I can hold up here and fight my urge to go outside. But I have to be a little bit disciplined because I basically slept all morning after my second night in a row where I didn't get enough deep sleep and really felt tired. So something has got to give, and I need to get stuff done. And I'll explain to you what I'll have to do in a minute. But first, hey the Lummen everyone, welcome, welcome. Indrak, thanks for joining us. And yeah, so everyone who's watching, welcome to my live stream. I'm Jochen, the Monospace Mentor. In my day job, I'm the CTO of a small web hosting company, and that will be important when we come to what I'm going to do today. I'm also on the side doing DevOps training, DevOps coaching, basically sharing decades of experience that I've gathered along the way, and that's part of why I'm doing this live stream, but also because, to be honest, what I'm having to do today isn't the most glamorous stuff, and I thought, well, even though you watch me for a little bit of entertainment and maybe a little bit of learning, today I can use your help in keeping me accountable and keeping me company while I'm doing what I'm going to do. The Laman says cold shower will wake you up. I am pretty much awake now after sleeping a few more hours and already having 2 coffees in, and the tea that I just prepared will also help me. And so I set my plan, and you probably already saw that, but I can share it again. So the plan is working on a new container build process for our hosting platform, Learning Go, on the way. And Indrak asked, what is the biggest improvement in what I'm doing? Why is the build that I'm working on better than what we have before? So I think I'll best simply show you what I'm doing today. So let me quickly do a little bit of housekeeping. I'm setting up I set up a new VM for my coding work, and it's not got my fonts in there yet. So that's something that we'll have to share. That we'll have to do in .local/share. The Llama says, Learning Go, nice, it's in my plans to start. That's amazing. Yeah, I've been doing Ruby for more than a decade now, and it's still great. I do love Ruby. Nothing has changed in that regard. But when it comes to self-contained applications, yeah, Go is definitely better in terms of runtime requirements and stuff. And since I'm working on a container deployment process, it would be most easy, or the easiest, when I simply can put a binary inside the container, run that binary, and that binary takes care of all the intricacies that need to be done. That's much simpler than the Ruby code that we've been using so far. But first, let's get that font stuff out of the way. I want to copy everything I have on my workstation into here. Yes, please. Let's my password. What's going on? Oh, yeah, that wasn't great. not copying my whole share directory. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. So let's clean stuff up again. That was not great. Yeah, let's simply remove everything here. Oh my goodness. I'll take it back. I'm not awake yet. Come on, man. So, local share fonts. There we go. The Lum SCP, what is that? That's file copy via SSH. And the shell that I'm using is Z shell on Linux, of course, not macOS. macOS, come on. Yeah, I was using macOS for about a decade. I'll admit that. Another password. What's going on? Yeah, that looks better. Why Z shell? Z shell has a few more features compared to Bash, or at least it had back in the day. I've been using Z shell for probably 20 years now, and back then there were a few additions to Bash as well, quality of life improvements, basically stuff like but Z shell really enabled more customizations, especially when Oh My Z Shell came out, when Robbie Russell published Oh My Z Shell, which is basically a plugin manager for Z Shell that came with lots of themes and as I said, quality of life improvements. And so that got me switching to Z Shell. I'm not using Oh My Z Shell anymore. My dot files are now homegrown, but I do use a few plugins because now there's also a plugin, or multiple plugin managers actually for Z Shell that make it much easier to add customizations. So if you want to find out more about that, check out my dot files and you can find my Z Shell configuration in there. So now we have our fonts here. Let's force an update of the font cache. That's that. And will Ghosty pick up the new font now? Yeah, that looks like Operator Mono. Okay, so let me log out here. Let's make you full screen. And we should be able to join this. Okay. The Llama said, I'm using WSL on Windows. Yes, still using Windows. Any opinions on that? Well, it's a godsend, basically. If you are still stuck with Windows, then WSL is the best way to, except, of course, setting up a complete Linux VM. WSL is certainly a good way to get Linux stuff on a Windows workstation. And actually, as far as I can tell, the amount of choice you have in terms of Linux distributions is growing as well. There's now even Arch for WSL and stuff like that. So, of course, moving to a full-grown Linux installation on your workstation is what I would recommend the most. But while you are still based on Windows, WSL is the way to go, I think. Because you can get all the Linux command line goodness that you want, and even if you like start GUI applications, but not sure if that really blends in well with all the other Windows stuff. Yeah, I would recommend starting with Ubuntu. Ubuntu or Debian. Ubuntu is a little bit more modern in terms of software versions. For the time being, I guess it's a really good starter distribution. Most of the tutorials that you'll find online will be based on Ubuntu as well. And a good alternative would be Pop! OS, which is also based on Ubuntu, but is now going to come with its own desktop environment, Cosmic, which is also pretty interesting. Pop! OS was what got me back to running Linux on the desktop a few years ago. As I said, I was using macOS for quite a while, and I tried Windows. That was what got me familiar with WSL. That didn't stick though, because I did a dual boot installation of Linux, Pop! OS to be precise, because of its NVIDIA support. And when I realized, okay, I can do everything that I need to do in my daily work and even in gaming on Linux, I stopped booting into Windows anymore. And so that quickly led to me removing Windows from my workstation and running a full Linux workstation. Tom said, why not start with something like Linux Mint? Yeah, Linux Mint is definitely also a good entry-level experience. Welcome, Tom, by the way. Okay, so now what am I doing? That's something that I ask myself on a daily basis, but I'd like to explain to you what I'm doing at the moment. So, the hosting platform my business is running as a product is specialized in running high-performance websites based on WordPress and Drupal. We started out supporting Drupal as the open source content management system. Yeah, it's basically a platform as a service. You take your Drupal or WordPress website, you can deploy your code to our platform, and we provide the rest. We run the databases, we run caching proxies, we run everything that is necessary to run a high-performance website. We do all the load balancing setup, stuff that's necessary, shared storage with storage redundancy, all these things that web agencies basically don't want to deal with if they're clever. And we started doing that in 2010. And back then, there wasn't any container-based deployment or something like that, let alone Kubernetes or stuff. It wasn't yet popular. And so the deployment that we do up until now is pretty much homegrown and not based on containers. It's basically running either on bare metal servers or on cloud-based servers, VMs, VPSs basically. And we use Chef as our configuration management software, and everything that is deployment is also based on Chef. So if you add a new website to your cluster, then Chef will go and create all the necessary directories and things like that, and set things up so the new website will be deployed on all the application servers. Tom says, hope you don't upset Matt being in that business. Hopefully we are taking a little bit of business from WordPress VIP, but I know what you mean. And yeah, I don't have to have a Mullenweg in my life, really not. Let me get something on the screen so you can compare, because I need to get it on screen anyway. And I'm still getting used to using Zelich as my terminal multiplexer, but it's really nice. I did make a few changes to it, so I can easily use it with NeoVim and things like that. As you can see in the status bar down there, all my Zelich shortcuts are based on Alt, not on Control anymore, because, yeah, as you probably know, everything in Vim is based on Control. And I also want to be able to easily switch between Zelich panes and Vim panes with Control H and Control L, and so I had to switch my Zelich key bindings to Alt, but that works pretty nicely, and if all else fails, I can still use Alt G to lock Zelich, and then all the keyboard commands will be passed through to the application running in the terminal anyway. So, did I already clone our chef cookbooks? I did not, so I guess that should pretty much work out of the box if I can. Oh, give me just a second. I need to check where the repository for our chef cookbooks is. I don't think it's... Just a second, I need to log in. Don't think it's in the engineering group yet. I had to touch my YubiKey to log into GitLab. So, where are our chef cookbooks? Yeah, that they are at the top level, which means... wait, what am I? Oh, what am I doing? I'm making things so much more complicated for myself by also forcing myself to use my split keyboard in Colmac layout with new layer keys. Yeah, I'm really challenging my brain at the moment. Praxeus joins us. Hello, good morning to you. Give me just a second, Tom, to find my feet again. Why doesn't... Why doesn't this... Why doesn't font size increase work anymore? I don't want to make fonts too small for you. Misa confused. Let me... get a look at my dot files. Something's not right. Ghosty. What's the meta there? I did not redefine any... key bindings. Does it work in my usual terminal? Does not. Interesting. Oh, it's because Ghosty uses a different key binding. It uses the equal sign and not the plus sign, which makes sense, yeah. Here we go. That's much better. We can even go one more. Okay, now chef cookbooks.git. Yay. So, Tom asked, do you have any thoughts on switching to sync? Although I ask without knowing if your company pays for a license. No, we don't. And we did actually switch to sync as our client software. We still have to move our Chef server to sync as well, but we are running a pretty old version of Chef that isn't covered by the new licensing from well, Chef software or Progress or how they're called today, and so yeah, that will happen eventually. But our most pressing thing was getting the Chef client migrated so we can get new versions there. And we switched to sync for that. I'm so used to saying Chef. As I said, I started using Chef from the start in 2010, and yeah, it's hard. It's very ingrained by now, and yeah, occasionally I will be aware enough to say sync instead of Chef. Okay, so yeah, what I wanted to do is show you. Oh wait, wrong directory. Here we go. What's going on? Okay, so let's start here. That's a Chef recipe, which is basically a Ruby script that does stuff on a server. For example, here this resource installs Node.js. It connects to the apt repository for Node.js at node source, and then we can use the package resource in Chef or Sync to install these packages. So we are, at this point, we are installing sudo, Node.js, Ruby, all kinds of stuff. And later on, this recipe will also start setting up website-specific things. As you can see here, it installs user groups, it sets up directories, and all kinds of stuff. And I will have to emulate that, and finally I'm getting to answer Tom's question there, in my container-based setup. So because we are very old-fashioned in our deployment at the moment, but would very much like to use container-based deployment because of all the improvements it'll bring, I need to find a way to create a build process that does the same things as our Chef-based deployment has been doing all this time, and does it inside a container, so that basically the application feels right at home, even though it's running in a container. It basically should not see that it's deployed inside a container instead of right on a VPS or cloud instance. That's what I'm doing. And I don't want to have to run Ruby stuff inside the container, because the whole runtime requirements will make things much too complex. And so I decided, okay, for the more static stuff that we have to do, like creating lots of directories and things, I'll simply use a shell script for the time being. The more dynamic stuff I will do in Go. So stuff that really depends on website specifics, like domain names and things like that. We'll expose that to a Go program as a JSON file, basically, that comes from our user dashboard and API application. And the Go script will then set up the right PHP version and all the domain names in Apache and stuff like that. And this might be an interim step. I'm not sure yet, but I thought, yeah, simply translating years of Ruby configuration into Bash is a good next step, maybe just interim step, maybe it'll stay that way, can't tell you yet. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. Here on the right you can see the Ruby code that has to be basically emulated, and here on the left you can see the Bash script that I'm building at the moment. Tom says, okay, cool, I'm an Ansible guy, but I like to see open source survive. I tried getting into Chef, even became the Chef maintainer in AUR for a bit. Oh, nice! But I guess Ansible for me is too natural to switch away, even though would love to write config in Ruby instead of YAML. I guess, yeah, that's the main advantage. But I'm not sure if I'd be doing it today. I might as well also use Ansible. Of course, we did consider switching to something else when the whole license changes came to Chef, but it would basically have meant to not only translate the more basic Chef stuff into Ansible, which isn't too complicated. I mean, you just basically translate, sorry, give me a second, translate stuff like this directory block here into a directory block in YAML for Ansible. But we also have, of course, Ruby logic in here, where things get very dynamic. And basically we would have to rewrite everything as Ansible modules in Python. And yeah, that would have been a tremendous amount of work for basically no tangible advantages other than now we are using Ansible. And that's why we didn't take that route. GoPro Lawyer joining us as well. Have fun lurking. Okay, so where did I leave off? What I did in on the Chef side was let me check. Basically, we are missing Ruby LSP, aren't we? Let's take care of that quickly. As I said, I've set up a VM that I use for coding on stream here because it's a little bit stripped down and doesn't have all the stuff that I have on my actual workstation. Makes things a little bit less complicated. Well, it does complicate stuff in the way that, for example, I'm missing a few things that are installed. Is it Ruby LSP or LSP Ruby? Yeah, it's probably Ruby LSP, right? Ruby-LSP. Yeah, and I'll probably use install. I'll be mistyping a lot today because, yeah, I'm forcing myself to using my split keyboard. I did manage to do the mental switch to Colmac for split keyboards at least, and I can type quite nicely if I'm focusing. And of course, doing a live stream is everything else but focusing. It's taking care of all kinds of stuff, chat and my broadcasting software and all kinds of things. And in that situation, basically my muscle memory takes over, and that leads to me mistyping a lot. And so just the other week I thought, well, I can either plateau at this point and just use Colmac and split keyboards for writing on my own. And otherwise use the traditional monolithic keyboards that I have on my shelf back there for live coding, or I can force myself to learn and really build up the muscle memory to use split keyboards on a continuous basis, and I decided to do that. So bear with me while I'm fumbling my way towards my goals here. I'll do my best. So, over time we did a lot of refactoring of our chef code. For example, I created these libraries where we have quite a few helper methods that don't pollute our chef code anymore. They provide just simple helper methods that generate path names and things like that. And that's where I am at the moment. I did last translate the configuration snippets dir method here, where we basically simply say, okay, the configuration, the directory where we put pre-configured configuration snippets for Drupal and WordPress is in the local deployment dir and its subdirectory .config. And as you can see, that is the same. Oh. Why does this not work? I can't switch between panes here. Is it because I need to... Ah, yes, that might have been the case, actually, because the plugin that I'm using in NeoVim to support Zelich has only gotten Zelich support recently. So it might have been not up to date. I'm not sure. It probably won't work right out of the box here, which means I have to restart NeoVim. Does it work now? Yes, it just doesn't work inside Vim, apparently. Can I switch over here? No, I can't. Yeah, that's because of NeoVim, I guess. Does it work now? Yes. Okay, here we go. So, let's open the container setup script again. And let's switch over here, open the cookbook again, especially the site deployment library. And so here we have the local temp dir that's translated as well. So the next directory here is the deployment control dir. So deployment control dir equals our local deployment dir, which hasn't been, yeah, it has been defined already, and then .deploy. That's that. Tom says a split keyboard is so much more comfortable. I think you'll enjoy it, but I will say I don't think I'm as fast or accurate typing on a laptop after a few years, almost exclusive on split. Okay, so you've been using split all this time. Yeah, I've been using splits for a long time too, but the thing is that I actually chose to switch to Colmac. I had to do 3 attempts over the years to use Colmac. Twice I failed and gave up after a while, and for the 3rd time it's stuck. As I said, I'm able to type on the split Colmac layout if I can focus, for example, if I sit at the coffee shop and write an email or stuff like that, that works quite nicely. But coding, especially live coding, while I'm talking to people and trying to formulate my thoughts at the same time, that's quite the different challenge. And so this needs practice, practice, practice. And yeah, and I'm determined to get that practice. Now, we will switch over here. Oh, wait. Why did I... Yeah, here we go. Deployment control directory. And now we're getting into real deployment territory. This is the document route where the application will be picked up from the web server. Kiksak, hello! Distro is Bluefin, which is based on Fedora Silverblue. I really like Fedora as a distribution. It's got so many up-to-date packages and things, and Bluefin, especially its developer edition, is really, really great. I love how it works. I love the way it manages updates, and I'm very happy with it. I did actually write a blog post about it at monospacementor.com. Thanks for the hydrate, Zigzag. It's important, especially given that it's summer here in Ireland, which means it's about 20 degrees. I'm a little bit feeling pulled outside, but yeah, as I said, the person that sleeps all morning has to work all afternoon. Now, duckroot. Duckroot equals... now we'll have to do some more concatenation. That's the deployment control, dear. Yeah, okay. So yeah, this is pretty much just building one Lego brick on the other here at the moment. And that's why I'm actually doing this translation here into a shell script, because I really can't tell from the actual steps that are in the chef recipe which directory will be created and where stuff will get put. There's so many layers of abstraction that we've built up over the years that it's really become even intransparent, to be honest. And so I really need to build this up from scratch, basically, to simply get an overview of what's happening, and that requires quite a bit of work here. So dockroot is current, and then the website's dockroot. Oh, yeah, that is actually dynamic. Customers can define the dockroot directory themselves. First, we only had the directory name dockroot hard-coded, and that worked for most people, but other people who were moving over from different hosting providers had different directory names, like /web or /www or something, and so we made this dynamic, and so we'll have to do something different here. Because yeah, let's make it clear that these are website specific details, and while I'm hard coding them at the moment, those will have to come out of some configuration file eventually. But for the time being, I'll hardcode those. And here we have the file system layout. Let's make this a whole block here. Let's make it this way too. So we'll have to use this and then say, okay, and from here that's going to be current, and then the website doc root. Host domain, I'll get to that later. I don't want to translate everything here, just in case it won't be necessary. Okay, these aren't directories anymore. These are actually, this is information that's mostly website specific and might not be necessary anymore. For example, the HTTP port, that's the port of the PHP FPM daemon that runs this particular website, because at the moment we are running all websites of a customer side by side. And so those different websites need to have different PHP FPM ports. And since we are going to switch to a container-based deployment, that won't be necessary anymore. We can run every website in its own container, and therefore it can use the default PHP FPM port for every website. That's going to be more interesting. Crash System asks, FPM not worker. You got me confused there. Worker is on the Apache side, isn't it? PHP worker threads instead of FPM. That's an interesting question, actually. At the moment we are using FPM. Yeah, you're thinking of Apache. Yeah. Yeah, we are, of course, using worker threads in Apache, but those are talking to FPM instances. Okay, so let's go back to our actual deployment recipe. That's here mostly in the box recipe. Those are just plumbing things. Here we have the loop starting that goes through all websites of a specific cluster and therefore customer. And here we're starting to set things up. We set up a deployment group and deployment user. That won't be necessary either anymore. And then we create the user home dir. I guess that's not necessary. Well, we'll have to do this differently in the future, because users won't be able to log into containers. They will. That's something that will require a little bit of thought. Crash System says coffee hasn't kicked in yet. I can relate. I'm still struggling with focusing myself. my sleep still isn't optimal. It's gotten better in recent weeks, but it's still a little bit concerning that there are nights where I don't get almost any deep sleep, according to my watch, and I definitely feel that way in the morning too. So yeah, that's why after 2 bad nights in a row, I did sleep in until noon today. Which means I'll have to do some work this afternoon to not lose the day completely. Now, the user home directory, we did define it over there. It's defined up here, and we probably have to move the home directory from local storage to shared storage, so we can spin up yeah, that makes sense. We can spin up a container, an interactive container and connect that somehow via SSH, so people can log in and do maintenance work. And in order to preserve their user home directory, we'll have to move that to shared storage. For the time being, simply to keep things not too complex and not to mix this migration work that I'm doing at the moment with architectural work that will be necessary later, I will actually keep it as it is for the time being. Create user home directory. So we'll do an okay, dear. Oh, this is so back to the Stone Age for me. -p, basically user home dir, right? There we go. At the moment, I'm not going to care about owners and modes. But at least, hey, this whole block has been replaced by a single line in a shell script. Things are getting simpler. Okay, here we go into deployment. That's more interesting. So we have the local deployment dir. That needs to be created. Oh, what did I do? Let's call it local deployment 2. So it's going to be okay there. Tom responded to crash systems. I think PHP FPM has pools of worker processes. Don't remember where it's inappropriate to split tenants. This is definitely a very niche topic, but you can really split people up. Yeah. Thing is, you have worker pools of FPM processes running on a specific port, and so basically the web server in front of the application server, FPM is basically a PHP application server. The web server connects directly to the PHP application server to FPM, and FPM then has its own worker management, and therefore we can run different PHP applications in different FPM instances. Each FPM instance runs on its own local port, and Apache basically simply proxies requests to the port that is responsible for a specific application. And Apache does so based on domain names. So we basically map domain names to FPM ports. And of course, on that port, we need to make sure that the correct application is running that belongs to the domain names in question. Now, the local deployment dir is defined up there, so we'll do a -p local deployment dir. Then we'll link the user home dir. No. Okay, yeah, the user home dir's site directory, which has to be created too. I wonder where that got created. See, that's what makes things really challenging for me here. There's a lot of stuff happening here, and while I did get hold of the user home dir, the subdirectory site in there needs to be created somewhere too. And I wonder where that is, because here we only create the user home dir itself. And yes, we can of course create a link without the target actually existing, but since we do have a working setup here, it needs to be created somewhere after the fact. Interesting. So things are not 100% in order of the dependency, basically. Anyway, so what we do, we link local deployment dir wait, needs a $sign, of course. Local deployment dir to user home dir /site. That's where site gets created. I got it the other way around. Of course, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. That creates a link named site in the user's home directory that points to local deployment dir. Okay, makes sense. Okay, now we'll create the local temp dir as well for temporary files and stuff. So I'm going to use mkdir all this time here. And that's going to be local temp dir. All right. Now let's scroll this. I'll simply copy these comments here, which hopefully makes it easier to find where I pulled this stuff from. Just noticed that an ad is running. Shared file system dir needs to be created. It's down here. I guess this loop here made a bit more sense in the past, but apparently we dropped creating a few subdirectories here otherwise, because this loop is just a single run, and that's the shared file system /logs. So we can more or less do it this way. Actually, that shared storage stuff needs to happen outside now. That shouldn't be part of the container setup process at all. Let's add a comment. Rushback, hi, how you doing? Welcome to the stack, my friend. Okay, now we're creating another helper variable over here. And that is shared file system dir shared. Okay, that is very redundant, but I know what's happening here. So yeah, let's transfer that over as well. I guess that needs to be somewhere here. And we'll call that site website shared. And that is the shared file system dir / shared. And that needs to be created as well. And it should, yeah, let's call it shared storage. Otherwise, I'll get confused. Trivia 233, welcome to the stack. Welcome, welcome. I'm Jochen, the Monospace Mentor. Hope you're having a great day. So, shared storage. And inside shared storage, we'll create a bunch of subdirectories. And those are now very application related. Trivia asks, what are you doing there? Okay, so let me explain again. My business has been hosting high-performance websites based on Drupal or WordPress since 2010. And since 2010, we've been using Chef to set up our whole infrastructure, hundreds of Linux servers, doing all kinds of stuff to run these websites. Databases, caching, proxies, load balancers, all kinds of stuff. And we finally are in the process of moving over to a container-based deployment. And that means that I have to basically migrate all the logic that we have in our Chef recipes, because we've been using Chef as our configuration management and deployment software all this time, to something that basically creates a container that the application feels right at home in. So the insides of the container should look exactly how things are looking on the cloud instances and bare metal servers that we are using at the moment. And I decided to make things simple, at least as an interim step, by translating all the Ruby logic that we have in our Chef recipes into basically a bash script, as long as it's more or less static, where only directories get created and maybe configuration files get created and stuff like that. And we'll also have to do a little bit of Go coding. So I'm going to learn Go on the way to do the more dynamic things, like, for example, if we want to create the configuration for Apache or the configuration for the PHP application server, because some of the configuration values will depend on the website. For example, Apache needs to know which domain names are connected to which application. So we'll provide something like a JSON configuration file that contains all the dynamic details, and the Go application will read those, and then...
It's a Unix system. I know this.
Thanks for the follow. And do all the dynamic stuff, like creating additional configuration things.
It's a Unix system. I know
Rushback, welcome. I appreciate the follow. This is pretty trivial stuff that I'm doing at the moment, basically. Whoa, Tom's following as well. Nice. It's trivial. I'll admit this is still a very trivial thing. The actual container setup will become a little bit more interesting, but first I need to get a handle on the whole complexity that is our deployment setup that has been grown over 15 years now. And so at the moment I'm simply translating Ruby blocks from basically chef's directory resource into mkdir commands on the bash side. Let's see, we should be finished with that pretty soon now. And so things are going to be a little bit more interesting soon. So that's shared storage, and then instead of a loop, we can simply use the curly braces here to say, okay, I want to have a public subdirectory, a private subdirectory, and a temp subdirectory. And that's now pretty application related here. Public, basically, in the shared storage, public is basically files that get served, static files that get served for the web application, like, for example, images that have been uploaded to a WordPress or Drupal instance. Those get served by the web server, i.e. Apache. Then there needs to be a private subdirectory as well, because of course there are files related to the application. The application needs to have access to files that won't get served to the internet directly. They will be served by the web application, or maybe transformed by the web application and then served from PHP. And the same goes for temporary files, because when the web application creates temporary files, we can't put them on the local drive of the cloud instance where the application is running, but because our applications, as I said, we are running high-performance websites, our web applications run on multiple servers with load balancing and all these things. And we need to prevent the case that the web application creates a temporary file which happens on one application server and stores a reference to that temporary file in the database, and then another application instance on a different cloud instance wants to pick up this temporary file and can't find it locally because it's only created on one of the VPSs. And so the temporary files need to be stored in shared storage as well, because the shared storage, as the name implies, is available to all web application servers. So, and that's why we need to create the public subdirectory, the private subdirectory, and the temp subdirectory here. Then we create a few helper symlinks, and I guess that will also confuse me a little bit, but let's see. We do create shared storage, a link to shared storage in We don't need to use... Do we need to use quotes? I guess it's a little bit cleaner and it doesn't cost anything, so okay. And that goes to the local deployment dir and then .shared. Yeah, that makes it a little bit easier for us to tell our customers if you want to access the shared file system, simply go to the .shared directory in your deployment directory. You can basically use .shared as a relative path instead of having to point them to the absolute path to the shared, where the shared shared file system is mounted, because that's at a different file system location. Keeping stuff nearby is basically the purpose of these symlinks. Because yeah, as if you jump above here, you can see the local storage. We chose serve www.freistilbox, which is the name of our hosting platform, and the shared storage is at glfs/fb sites. glfs is still a holdover from when we used GlusterFS as our shared file system. We don't do that anymore because we ran into quite a few problems early on. For, I guess, more than 10 years now, we've been running MooseFS, and that has been absolutely fantastic for us. So yeah, you can see the file system locations of these two very related file systems are quite a bit apart. And so we chose to create a few symlinks here to make stuff easier for our customers. Now we will link to the deployment control dir. Deployment control dir. Oops. Deployment control dir slash. Nope. It goes the other way around. That's what I meant. It'll keep confusing me. It's deployment control dir current. Oh, yeah, okay. Deployment control dir current goes to local deployment dir current. Yeah, okay. Local deployment dir slash current. And it's ln-s. ln-s shared file system dir slash logs goes to local deployment dir logs. So yeah, basically we put everything that is useful to our hosting customers into the local deployment dir, even though the actual directories are located somewhere else. Now that I can see how this works, it does actually make sense. So basically these are quality of life helper links. Hey, ICQ! IceQ4, yeah, sorry about that, got confused there a little. Welcome, long time no see. Well, I'll admit I haven't been doing live streams in quite a while as well. I've been doing my office hour regularly on Fridays, but this is the first time I'm doing a live coding/working stream in quite a while. I decided to get a little bit of company so I can basically use you for not only as accountability buddies to keep me working, but also as my rubber ducks. Makes things easier to comprehend if I can explain them to you. Now, final symlink here is going to be the local temporary directory. We also have a local temp directory here because even though some temporary files need to be located in the shared file system for the reasons that I just outlined. This goes, of course, with a performance penalty. The shared network file system is, of course, much slower than writing temp files locally. So we also provide a temp directory locally that's just used for actual temporary storage. For example, if a file, say an image that gets uploaded, needs to be transformed in a way and only then stored in shared shared storage. That can easily happen locally because the file is actually ephemeral and doesn't need to be persisted in any way. So that is the local temp dir. Local temp dir, and we'll link that to local deployment dir /.tmp. We'll make it a hidden directory to not clutter the local deployment dir too much. Okay. ICQ asked in chat, the question would be if you have a proper website, forum or anything that accumulates the supply chain of hardware parts. Not sure what you mean. Do you mean, say, a specific hard or SSD component and its supply chain? I wouldn't expect that to be public in any way, because all the vendors will keep that very close to their chest. I would be very surprised if you could get supply chain information of hardware that gets sold on the open market. I would expect this to be more or less to be business secrets. Because, of course, where vendors source their components is pretty much their competitive advantage. For example, being able to get the same part from the cheapest source over in China. You don't want your competitors to use the same source. In part, they might be open with that, yeah. But if you want to get a complete supply chain overview, that's going to be almost an impossible challenge, I would wager. Okay, now we've reached the actual headline deployment, so things are hopefully getting a little bit more interesting here. So we create the let's first go ahead and copy the headline here, and then we'll do an mk dir $deployment control dir. That's the, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And then inside the deployment control dir, we also create a subdirectory releases and hooks. So we'll do that right after deployment. Ugh, I can't type really. And we'll again use the curly braces that where the shell allows us to expand. However, this is actually not going to be necessary anymore. Because this is just this gets created due to the fact that we have long-running servers, application servers, while the websites, of course, get updated all this time, and so they get deployed into their own release directory all the time, and the old releases get cleaned up afterwards. Since we are going to switch to a container-based deployment, each container image will only carry the current release and replace the container running the previous release. So this infrastructure is actually not going to be necessary anymore. Let me see how much of that even is going to be necessary. That's all deployment related, and that deployment will completely be replaced by the image build process that I'm working on. So we can actually get rid of that. And yeah, we won't need this. What we'll need is configuration snippets. And so we will have to create the configuration snippets dir. Then there's also going to be a Drupal subdirectory, and there needs to be a WordPress subdirectory as well. So let's do that too. Configuration snippets dir / both Drupal. The fact that we don't actually create configuration snippets for WordPress has been a bug for far too long. And just the other day we got a support request asking for that, so that needs to be fixed anyway. And I guess after that it's going to become complicated, but because now we are creating files, configuration files that can be included by a Drupal application or a WordPress application, containing all kinds of credentials, database access stuff, and things like that. Yeah, have fun lurking, IceQ4. And we'll have to basically replace the chef-based templating process here with something that probably will be handled by a Go binary that we'll have to build. But how would that have to look like? We go through the available supported Drupal versions, and then we'll create a site configuration file and a memcache configuration file. I wasn't even aware that we have prod and beta configuration snippets. Interesting. Alright, I guess we'll simply emulate that as bash loops. So we will for I guess Drupal version in, and I can only guess that that's going to be, I mean, I can't find that out myself, but I will now guess that that's D7 and D8. Do for snippet. Inside memcache. We're missing a D there. Do. And I guess, yeah, we'll have to iterate over releases as well. Release in prod beta. Do. Oh, that's a lot of logic. I am very curious how this is going to look in a few months' time, because that looks really iffy to me at the moment. But yeah, if I guess dollar release equals prod. Oops. Oh dear. Split keyboard is tripping me up. If then snippet name equals settings dash dollar Drupal version. Oh dear, Drupal version. Then snippet. That snippet is also nice. Snippet. Snippet. And then .php. And I guess I'm gonna do an else. And close things up, and then I'll simply copy this here, and then we'll have a release as well. Ah, I see. Okay. How did snippet get in there? I thought I corrected that. Interesting. So only beta will have this suffix here. Okay. All right. Interesting choice. And then we'll have to somehow template this. So I guess this needs to, or it's not a fix me, it's basically a to-do. Site template, which is going to be the Go binary that takes the configuration details for a specific website and creates specific files from it. And that template will have to use specific placeholders, and the template name is basically simply going to be dollar configuration. Let's remove the comment so I get auto completion here. That's going to be configuration snippets dir slash Drupal slash dollar snippet name. And for the time being, that needs to be commented out. Oh, and we of course need the template name as well, and that basically needs to be configuration snippet Oh dear. Drupal. And then snippet. So site or memcache. The version specific stuff. Will I ever get this right here? What's going on? I think cursor position is getting confused here, isn't it? Yeah! Zelich, are you tripping me up there? Let's... Can we... Strange. Never seen this before. So configuration snippet, Drupal site and Drupal memcache. And then configuration snippets, Drupal, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, that should work. All right. Here over in Chef, we chose to basically import the few specific details that we need inside these configuration snippets into the template. The new mechanism will basically have a site details file that contains those and many more, like domain names and owner email addresses and stuff like that. And the templating binary will simply pick the correct things out of that JSON file and replace those inside the template file. So template files will always have all details of a website and just pick the few that it needs. All right, now, oh yeah, the database configuration. Okay. I guess we can actually simplify this. The thing is, here we create those database credentials files separately. Why? Because we need to parse the database, the related databases for a website from our infrastructure information, and if we find a way, when we find a way to basically incorporate those databases in the site configuration details file, basically as a JSON array or something, then it's just a matter of iterating over those. So we can actually simplify this and say, yeah, not only will we create site and memcache, we will also create DB. And that's then settings, Drupal version DB. Yeah, that's going to be config snippet is Drupal settings. Over here we can see how this is set up. Settings, Drupal version DB, and that's exactly what we are doing here as well. Drupal version snippet. The snippet is going to be DB in that case. The only thing is that we will have to have different template files for the release. That needs to be part of the template file. So we'll have to have a template for the prod version and the beta version. That could be a source for errors, but yeah, we'll see how this works. Maybe you can simply drop the beta stuff. I'm not sure if that was a temporary workaround for something. I'll have to do a little bit of archaeology there. And then we have snippets for Redis too. Okay. I guess that will have to be done differently as well. I mean, eventually we'll have to switch to something like an environment variable based setup. I'm not sure if I want to actually translate this, but yeah, I guess we do have customers using this setup, so... Okay, since we'll have to... Hey Theo! Yeah, nice of you to stop by. Good. Late morning? How's it going? I managed to do a live coding stream. Can you imagine that? After weeks and weeks and weeks. I decided, yeah, I'll get myself some company while I'm doing these while I'm working on our new container-based deployment. Where are we in time? Okay, yeah, been going for a while now. Nice. Network pen test. Hopefully it's not mine. The Laman asks, why so many loops? Because the reason is that we'll have to create quite a bunch of files here. Yeah, you keep whistling, Theo. We need to create configuration files for Drupal 7 and for Drupal 8 because they have a different syntax. We need then, for each of these versions, need to create the general site configuration, which contains stuff like the domain names and things. No idea what's in there, actually. I can't tell you from the top of my head. Then we'll have to create the memcache configuration file, the database configuration file, and as I basically just found out, we also create different versions of these configuration files for production and beta. I'm not sure what beta is. I assume that was just a workaround to let customers use a newer version of these configuration files before we rolled them out for all our customers, and that might be a thing that we can drop now that this transition has been made. But yeah, that's why we have these nested loops. And I think I'm going to take databases out and basically create the database configuration file separately, because apparently we don't have any beta versions here, so I can actually take out one of these nested loops. And so snippet is just going to be db for the time being. something like this, so we don't actually need this loop either. And then we have the Redis servers, and for each of these servers, again for each Drupal version, apparently we create a separate file for each Redis server that's attached to this website. So it looks like we have even that it's even possible to connect multiple Redis instances to the same website. And yeah, so I guess we'll have to have this inside here. Redis servers. For this one, we won't have any. And that will require another loop, but let's first fix the DB thingy here, because yeah, if this is the only loop we need, I'll copy that for Redis, because for Redis we'll need, oh wait, we basically need something like this: Redis server in $Redis servers. But let's first do this up here. We don't need that. And I guess there's also no fork for, and this is just going to be DB. And that's just Drupal database as the name of our snippet. And here we have multiple Redis servers, and those then will create config snippet. That's Drupal settings version Redis server ID. So that basically needs to be, oh, if in Redis servers we have these IDs, then I can use the loop variable Redis server. But the templating helper command needs to know which server ID this is then going to be. Snippet Drupal Redis. That will complicate things. I wish we had taken a different approach here. Apparently, for the databases, we are writing all because yeah, a website can have multiple databases as well, but we write all database credentials into a single file, and the customer then has to pick which database they want to talk to, or if they want to talk to multiple databases even. That's just a single file, so the templating mechanism doesn't need to Oh, yes, it does. Wait, we iterate over the databases here. So... Oh, DB is not literal. Yeah, I missed that. So DB is the database ID. Take care, IceQ4. So for databases, the templating mechanism needs to pick the right database as well. I don't like that. We might not be able to write a generic templating application. We need to be able to, or at least we need to be able to pass in specific information. I guess, yeah, we now have definitely crossed over from simply translating Ruby into Bash into rebuilding business logic in a different way that suits the container build use case. And that means I need to come up with different approaches here. Yeah, I guess we'll have to tell our templating mechanism to pick different aspects of our website details. Pick only the Memcache stuff, pick only database stuff for this specific database, pick only Redis stuff for this particular Redis database. So I guess we would do something like pass in a switch. Pass in the template. Well, we could actually just output this to standard out, which will make testing easier. And in this case, we'll write it into a configuration snippet. And so snippet name is not right here. That's going to be DB. Wait, snippets to Drupal. Wait, no, it's actually a snippet's name, but the snippet name is not going to be DB, but the ID of the database, which is going to be DB1, DB7, DB47, something like that. And so the thing that I need to avoid is all the databases related to the website will be inside the central site configuration file. That's going to be a JSON file that has all the information on a specific website, including its databases and stuff. The site template command will be able to parse JSON and read that stuff in. And what I don't want to do now is to somehow need the same intelligence in my bash script here. basically I want to tell the templating command create configuration files for this website. So all I want to tell it is actually, yeah, we don't want to tell it the Drupal version either, actually. Or do I? That will be quite the complex command that we'll have to build there. How much do I want to stuff in there? Yeah, the reason why this is now getting complicated is we are leaving the static realm here. By static, I mean where we simply create the same kind of directories and the same kind of files and stuff independently, completely independently from which website we're talking about. Stuff that is common to all websites. And now we are getting into territory that is website specific. For example, the amount of databases assigned to a website, Redis servers available to a website, and things like that. And that's now where things are getting interesting. And so, yeah. How will I play this? I think we can make things even a little bit simpler here. The template command will, of course, know its where its templates are. We'll have to build that in or pass it in, we'll see. Which means it'll be able to no. I was thinking if the command would be able to know, okay, I have configuration files for Drupal 7, I have configuration files for Drupal 8, I have configuration files for Drupal 10. And yes, we'll probably need Drupal 10, 9 and 10 in there as well. And if we could just tell it to check its templates and then go through them and generate them. For the static ones, like the central website configuration files, that's actually possible because there's always going to be one main configuration file for each website. But the amount of database and Redis configuration files will depend on the website and how many it has. So, I have an idea. let me see how I can explain it. Basically, we need two modes for our templating command. One would be, here's the site configuration, create this template from it. For example, create the site configuration file, create the memcache configuration file, and that's a single template each. And the template command will pick the relevant details and insert them for the placeholders in the template, and then it will write out the file. And yes, we are going to write it out to standard out, at least for the time being. I mean, that's what Bash is all about, isn't it? So that's that. Site template. We'll tell it which template file we want, and then we'll write it out to a specific file. No, we'll have to have the template command actually write out I see. And we'll need to have a PHP as well here, so let me see, like this. Another challenge has appeared. Even the name of the configuration file itself needs to be templated. Because if we want to play it like I thought of, we'll tell it to create we'll use a specific template file. That's okay. Let's use proper arguments here that make things easier to read. Named arguments instead of positional arguments. We can apply this motto to bash scripts or bash invocations as well. So what I thought of was, okay, use this template for this configuration file, but iterate over a specific detail array. And in this case, we'll say iterate over databases. Look into the site configuration, get the databases array, so the key databases, which needs to have an array behind it with additional information. Which is also going to be a challenge, but one step after the other. And that's also the template here. Template, and in this case we'll iterate over the Redis servers. Let's put it this way and use a different template here. That's snippet Drupal Redis, and it also needs to be version dependent. So I guess it's Drupal. Yeah, even up here we did change the snippet name depending on the Drupal version, but the configuration template needs, of course, to be dependent on the Drupal version as well. So that's Drupal version in the template name as well. Here as well, we'll have Drupal $Drupal version. And the template will then simply be database dot whatever my extension then is going to be. And the output file is then the final argument here. But the problem is for databases, the file name itself, like here, that's databases, right? Yep. So that's going to be Drupal. And then settings. The snippet name is up here. Anyway, no, we haven't defined it here, so we'll need to grab that from here. The snippet name is going to be settings, Drupal version, and then the database name. And the shell script here can't predict this. And question is, how do we make this templatable? Oof. We either need to hard code this into the command, or we'll have some kind of a YAML file or another JSON file where we map a specific key to a template name or a file name template. So we'll basically tell it, okay, oh, this could be, yeah, interesting. I considered this to be the template file name directly. Configuration underscore snippet underscore Drupal D8. I guess that should be an underscore as well. Database. But that could be a key in another JSON file where not only we'll have information on how the template actually is called. It'll probably have the same name, just with .template as an extension or something. But we can also tell the command the file name that it's going to write out. And we'll just tell it where to write it. So let's see. In this case, we don't prescribe the snippet name because the snippet name is not known at this point in the script. We'll call this how are we going to call it? Target dir? Destination? Destination. And the actual file name will be determined by the template command itself. For the time being, it's going to be determined by magic. And we don't have to even tell it to iterate, do we? I guess. Maybe we don't. I mean, if we already store meta information about templates, we could also store that this template is an iteration template about a specific configuration key, so it's all going to be magic. All right, now let's see if we postpone all this business logic to when we build the site template command itself. We could actually get rid of all that stuff here. Interesting. I mean, we don't even... Wow, this is challenging to juggle in my head. I'm trying not to throw out the baby with the bathwater here. Let me illustrate the actual problem here. So let's assume we'll have a site configuration file. That's YAML. So there is stuff like site ID. That's in our case as 4227, if I'm not completely mistaken. 4227, isn't it? It's 4221. Okay. So let's do it like this. Then we have more stuff like the main domain, for example. That's www.example.com. UQC, hello! How you doing? More stuff like that, and then we'll have databases, where we'll have something like DB1, and then that's going to be a host and username or database name. Well, that's basically then DB1, I guess. So username and a password. And the same if things are a little bit more complex for database 2. And we'll have the same thing for Redis and stuff. Okay, that's our site information file that the templating command is supposed to read. We might actually pass that file name in as well, just to make the command itself more flexible, not hardcode stuff. And now I had the additional idea. That's basically site details. Let's call it site details. And then we'll have templating metadata. And how would that actually look like? So we'll have a template that we'll call site. And where we'll have a template file. And in this case, we won't iterate over anything because the main site information is the single key value stuff, the single key value pairs up here, site ID, main domain, and similar things. And then we'll have a different type of template where I say, okay, database, we'll have template file as well. I guess we'll at least have to iterate over different Drupal versions. Okay. Oof. So let's visualize that too. Template directory. That's going to be templates. And then under this, we could say, okay, if we have a template called site, and it has a subdirectory, then we need to iterate over these subdirectories. So we might have a subdirectory, say D8 for Drupal 8. And in there, that's interesting. And by interesting, I mean challenging. Hey, Pixel Buttercup, how you doing? I'm trying to basically build a container build process that will emulate what our current infrastructure does using Chef. Our current hosting infrastructure uses Chef to generate all files and directories and things like that for our hosting platform. And we are in the process of switching over to container-based deployment. And since we don't want to have a big change where customers basically have to change everything they're doing at the moment, I'd like to basically make this as transparent as possible. And so the container build needs to somehow emulate what we've been doing so far. Of course, still taking advantage of what a container-based build process will give us. And oh, you watched my? Did you watch the old talk that I gave at data center? What was it called? Data center conference, open data center conference or something. That was years ago. More than 10 years ago, actually. Yeah, I'm old. Okay, so let's. How can we tell our templating command the stuff that it needs to know? That's my problem, basically. So we'll tell it down here. Create the site files. And now we need to tell it, okay, there are multiple site files actually. We could do that in the YAML itself, right? We could say, okay, for site files, we actually have multiple variants. So there's a D7, and in D7 we'll even have prod and beta. And the same goes for D8. I'm helplessly behind the times because, of course, this needs to be D10 by now. where we have prod and beta as well. And each of these will have a template file and a file name. Both can be patterns, but how do we define the placeholders? It was so easy using Ruby. Let's get some tea. I have a feeling that I took a wrong turn somewhere on the way here. How... Okay, so the main problem I have translating this stuff on the right to this stuff on the left is that this Ruby script, because chef recipes are more or less Ruby scripts with added infrastructure information, that this Ruby script knows everything about a website. And my bash script up over here doesn't. Because I don't want to basically parse JSON or YAML in a bash script. And so the Ruby script over here can easily, for example, iterate over databases. It takes all the databases that are available. Most of the time it's just going to be one single database. And then it iterates and creates the template files or the configuration files from a template. And I can't translate this loop over the available databases one-to-one to my bash script because the bash script doesn't know the list of databases. So that's the problem that I have to solve. Thank you for taking care of myself. Hydrating now. Posture is okay. I just stretch myself a little. Okay, so by deciding I'm going to use a bash script to do that stuff, I did get ahead quickly while stuff was still more or less static, where I only had to create symlinks and directories and stuff. But now that I need detailed information that can vary a lot between websites, now I'm basically at a loss because I don't have that information. Tom said, would you maybe pass all the config info to the container when the container is launched? Yeah, I could either pass it to the container when it's launched, or I could integrate it into the build process of the container, which I think I prefer. And the problem is simply the problem is going to be the same. The problem is we'll have to create a number of files.
It's a Unix system.
And we don't know the number in advance. Setan Yako, welcome, and thanks for the follow. We don't know this, and I don't want the bash script to know this, because that would mean we either would have to have the bash script get this information dynamically by parsing JSON or something, and I really don't want to parse JSON in bash. Or we would have to have something create this script and have everything that is relevant basically stored up here. So basically the whole script would have to be a template again. And I guess we would just raise the problem to a higher level, higher level of abstraction. So what I'm doing up here is already working around the problem, because this is of course very site specific and needs to be replaced for each and every website we want to deploy. This is just my example website that I'm using here. So, was the wrong turn right at the start when I decided to use bash? Would I be better off writing a Ruby file that does the same here? Or then translating that to Go directly and creating directories and stuff right in Go? Or is there a way where I can actually write something in Go and pass it in these YAML files? Okay, let's start from the site details. In this case, we have two static key value pairs and an array of databases. And that needs to be pulled from our central infrastructure database. And then we'll have to create files from that. And I want to tell it, okay, create the what do I want to tell it in the first place? Tell it the site configuration files for D8. And then do the same for D9. Because if I can't tell my program what it's supposed to do, then I can't write the program. I might be getting tired because, yeah, it's 24 degrees in my office here. The weather outside is brilliant, and I've been going on for almost 3 hours now. So maybe I'm just deteriorating mentally a little bit here. Maybe it's a good idea to wrap things up at this point, take a walk outside, and think about this. Sometimes it's a good idea to simply take a break and leave stuff simmering in the back of my head. But let's see what Tom's got to share. If I were doing this, I'd definitely pass in the info at runtime instead of baking it in. Rebuilding for changes sounds painful and hard to test. Yeah, it does. As for all this setup, I'm not sure how much patience I'd have with bash. You seem to have a lot. But you can always include a Ruby interpreter in your container. Anyway, just so... Yeah, definitely. All hints and arguments are appreciated. That's why I'm doing this live stream after all. I mean, if I wouldn't want to invite feedback and suggestions, then I wouldn't do the live stream and would simply sit here alone on my own and do stuff. So don't hold back with feedback and suggestions. And yeah, I do appreciate what you're saying. I think it's not that much about I can't execute Ruby scripts, or I don't want to make an effort in turning Ruby into Go and things like that. It's more the general approach. That I'm going to take. And I think there are a lot of moving parts in here, or a lot of forks in future roads that I'm trying to anticipate. And maybe I'm making things too complicated for myself here. So question is, for example, do I want to have a template command that gets called once and generates all templates, because somehow it knows which templates to generate? Or does it just take care of a single file, and I'll have to tell it which file it has to create now, and which file it has to create now, and which template it has to use for which file, and things like that. So the general architecture, or the general approach here isn't decided yet, and I think that's the complexity that I'm dealing with here. And since I just arrived at this junction, I think I'm not prepared yet to make that decision, and that's why I think I'm going to take a break. I'll take a walk through the park and think about this, and hopefully I'll return with an inkling of an idea, and then we'll continue doing this on Thursday. I'm determined to do another live coding stream on Thursday afternoon, 2 p.m. Irish time, and I'll tell you what I've come up by then, and we'll see if it's still going to be bash, if the template command will become a bigger all templates command or something like that, and yeah, I'll have a better sense of direction where we are going to go. And so yeah, I'm happy that you joined me during this live coding stream. I was struggling a little bit with the decision, shall I do a live coding stream or shall I not? And in the end I decided, yeah, let's do that. So it's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again on Thursday. If you'd like to continue the conversation, consider becoming a member in the server room, my community of practice, where you can basically tackle your own growth. You have me and a lot of other people who will support you in your DevOps career, in becoming a system administrator, in getting into SRE and things like that. So check out the serverroom.sh, and until Thursday, I guess I'll see you then. Take care.